On February 28, 2014, the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA held its fourth annual Day on the Hill event at U.S. Capitol Hill. Approximately 75 delegates from 70 chapters traveled to Washington, D.C. to meet with their U.S. congressional representatives. This year marked the launch of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Caucus, an official U.S. congressional group dedicated to defending the human rights of persecuted Ahmadi Muslims and other oppressed religious minorities worldwide. The two co-chairs of the new bipartisan caucus, U.S. Congresswoman Jackie Speier, a Democrat from California, and U.S. Congressman Frank Wolf, a Republican from Virginia, addressed the delegates. Over a dozen media outlets covered the historic event.
In the name of Allah, gracious, merciful, Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings be upon you all. It is our honor and privilege to welcome you to the official launch of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Caucus. My name is Mahmoud Ahmad. I'm Assistant National Director of Public Affairs here on behalf of our National Director of Public Affairs, Amjad Mahmood Khan, who could not be here today. Ladies and gentlemen, today we live in an extraordinarily turbulent world. After a seemingly unstoppable movement toward liberty following the end of the Cold War, a recent global survey by Freedom House indicates that freedom has been on the retreat in each of the last 8 years. And so, as we look around the world and we see the troubling developments that we are observing, we look at our own nation's history and we see that our own founders, their wisdom was to enshrine the freedom of liberty and religious freedom in our Constitution to ensure that our democracy is sustained and has endured for over 2 centuries. And the very first freedom that they sought to secure was religious freedom. Famously, Thomas Jefferson said that one of the 3 things of which he was most proud was the Virginia Statute of Religious Liberty. And so we're tremendously proud to have our co-chairs, Representative Jackie Speier and Representative Frank Wolf here, and I want to congratulate them today for jointly establishing the first bipartisan congressional caucus dedicated to raising awareness about a Muslim community. Welcome Congresswoman Speier to the stage, and I was going to provide an introduction, but I understand that you have a vote coming up, so I'm going to let you come right to the stage without further ado.
Thank you. This is very exciting for Congressman Wolf and myself to be able to kick this off and create this bipartisan caucus in the 113th. Let me first say a few words about Congressman Wolf. This man has the words human rights attached to his name. He is the penultimate leader in this House on the issue of human rights and religious intolerance, and making sure that we as a Congress have a conscience on this issue. So I am deeply honored to be a co-sponsor of this caucus with him, and we are very lucky to have him as the co-chair. And I am thrilled that there are 75 of you here in Washington today to educate our colleagues on the Ahmadiyya community and how important it is for all of us to be educated and to recognize that there is gross religious intolerance against the community, particularly in Pakistan, but across the world as well. I had the great fortune of traveling to Silver Springs, Maryland, when His Holiness was visiting the mosque there, and had an audience with him, and was deeply moved by him and by the community with their great sense of commitment to this country and to religious freedom. And your commitment is our commitment in terms of making sure that there is not continued intolerance around the world for the Ahmadiyya community. I also want to compliment Congressman Wolf and Congresswoman Eshoo on the introduction of a bill last fall, which I did co-sponsor, which would create a special envoy for religious minorities in the Middle East and South Asia, something that your community has been embracing as well. I also want to compliment you for recognizing that there's ways to continue to give back. And for 3 years now, I have participated with you in your Muslims for Life campaign each year when you have done a blood donation drive here on Capitol Hill. And you have now collected over 25,000 pints of blood that are life-saving for some 75,000 people. So it's a privilege to be here with you. My good friend Shazia Sohail is not here yet, but I know she's around, another outspoken, charismatic leader of your community. And I'm now going to turn it over to Congressman Wolf, because as you can hear the bells ringing, they want us to come vote. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Jackie, and thank you for your comments, too, and I appreciate it. Also, on a special envoy bill, it would advocate for this very, very reason, and it's passed this House. We have 2 senators, I'm embarrassed to say, 2 Republican senators that are blocking the bill. One, Tom Coburn from Oklahoma, and they've almost moved the goalpost because we had an agreement last year that we would reduce one program to pay for this, and so maybe there's a misunderstanding. The other is Mike Lee from Utah. We put in a call to the office. Certainly they need time to look at it, but it's been over there for, as Jackie said, it passed here 401, and Asher and I worked on it 401 and 20. And so if you're talking to your friends on the other side of the aisle, let's move this bill, because this bill will have one central location whereby there will be an office to advocate for those religious minorities, not only the Ahmadis, Christian, Baha'i, in the Middle East. I've long partnered with the Ahmadi Muslim community here in Northern Virginia. Your community has been threatened around the world. In Indonesia, national law prohibits Ahmadis from sharing their faith with others, and in many provinces, local authorities have forced the closures of mosques. In Pakistan, as Jackie referenced, the Constitution explicitly declares that Ahmadis are non-Muslims and denies them equal rights with other Pakistani citizens. I can remember working with your community, we did a letter to Ambassador Holbrook, the gunning down. There were 70 killed in the 2 mosques in 2010. In Saudi Arabia, 2 men have been in prison, as you know, since May 2012. For Tom Lentos, and I know Jackie was good friends with Tom Lentos' commission, which I co-chair with Congressman McGovern, has what they call a prisoner of conscience. You adopt a prisoner of conscience. These 2 men would be able to be adopted. So what I would urge you, as you're here in town, to say, Mr. McGovern and Mr. Wolf have this program, and you should find a member of the Congress, a Republican and Democrat, and you can have 2 or 3 to adopt these individuals. Their commitment is that they will write the Saudi embassy. They will call the Saudi embassy. They will visit the Saudi embassy. They will raise this issue. They will periodically give speeches on the floor, because as we've learned from the days of Sharansky in the Soviet Union, when people in the West advocate, particularly members of Congress, they can make a big difference. As Americans, our precious rights of freedom of religion. President Reagan, one of my favorite presidents, said that the words in the Constitution and the words in the Declaration of Independence were not just a covenant for the people in Philadelphia in 1776, or in Philadelphia when they adopted the Constitution in 1787. But President Reagan said they were a covenant with the entire world. They transcend time and place. So they are basically the words in Declaration of Independence, Philadelphia Independence Hall, 1776, the same building in 1787, was a covenant with the 2 Ahmadis that are in prison in Saudi Arabia. We're a covenant, and a covenant is deeper, had greater depth than a contract. We have an obligation. America cannot be silent. We have an obligation to keep that covenant, and I'm committed, working with Jackie and the other members, to do everything we can to keep that covenant. Last thing is, I would suggest, and maybe Jackie would like to be a witness, maybe Jim McGovern and I can have a briefing, if we can, whereby the Ahmadi community can come up and can present basically some of the problems that were the problems, whether in Saudi Arabia, whether in Pakistan, or whether it be in Indonesia. So I am committed, working with Jackie, to do everything we can. And I would urge you, before you go, two things. When you're talking to any senator between now and the end, our resolution needs to pass. They need to ask their colleague, Senator Coburn and Senator Lee, to remove the hold. And secondly, find one member or two members, or 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 that like to talk to you in November of these even years when they're looking for help, that you want them to adopt these 2 men in Saudi Arabia, and they will commit that they will advocate for them in every way possible. As Jackie said, we do have a vote, so we're going to have to kind of run together. God bless you. Thank you very much.
Please welcome the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA's National Vice President and Missionary in Charge, Imam Nassim Mahdi. Please join us and give us a few words of wisdom.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum. May God bless you all with peace. Thank you everyone for coming. On behalf of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA, I extend an official welcome to all of you, and especially U.S. Congressman, Honorable Congresswoman Honorable Jackie Speier, and U.S. Congressman Honorable Frank Walker. Today, the Ahmadiyya Muslim Caucus is being launched on U.S. Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. This day also corresponds to our annual Day on the Hill effort, in which volunteers from 70 chapters and over 30 states assemble to meet with their congressional representatives. Why a caucus and why now? The persecution of Ahmadi Muslims worldwide, but particularly in Pakistan, has reached unprecedented levels. In only the past several years, over 130 Ahmadi Muslims have been killed in Pakistan. Ahmadi Muslims cannot freely vote, cannot worship, or even bury their dead there. Religious repression of Ahmadi Muslims is emblematic of the larger atrocities leveled against all religious minorities in South Asia, including Christians, Hindus, Sufis, and Shia Muslims. The new Ahmadiyya Muslim Caucus is a humble effort at harnessing the focused attention of our lawmakers on ways to redress the worst human rights abuses against religious minorities. But before I explain the goals of this caucus, let me give a very brief introduction of Ahmadiyya Muslim community. We are Muslims who believe in the Messiah, who is Ghulam Muhammad of Qadian, India. From its very inception 125 years ago, and in keeping with the true teaching of Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, the worldwide Ahmadiyya Muslim community has dedicated itself to spreading the message of peace and loyalty to one's homeland. In over 200 countries, members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community live their lives in full conformity with the laws of the land. We are dedicated to building and strengthening the rule of law and the advancement of peace everywhere. His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad, the global leader of tens of millions of Ahmadi Muslims worldwide, has been at the forefront of courageous and vigorous efforts to advocate for a pathway to peace in a world marked by wars and injustices. He has spoken to members of US Congress, the European Parliament, the UK Parliament, and dozens of other government supporters. As one of the oldest Islamic organizations in America, members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA have been following these same principles since our founding here in 1920. Now, I will highlight some of our community's most important campaigns over the past few years. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community launched its Muslim for Peace campaign from New York City in 2010 and successfully took the message to some 60 million Americans through the print and electronic media, as well as hand-to-hand, door-to-door, delivering our message all across America. Then we launched the Muslims for Loyalty campaign on January 11, 2011 to peacefully but forcefully convey the American Muslim youth that all such messages which encourage disloyalty to or terrorism against America contradict the teaching of Islam, the Holy Quran, and Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him. In 2011, Muslims for Life campaign was launched to honor the victims of 9/11 and emphasize that Islam holds life sacrosanct. Over the last 3 years, these campaigns helped collect more than 33,350 pints of blood, enough according to the Red Cross, and I say it with humbleness that 100,000 lives have been saved in the last 3 years. Every year we held a Muslim for Life blood drives here at the Capitol, and several members of US Congress gave blood to show a solidarity with our central message supporting the sanctity of life. Our community has earned a reputation for being a peace-loving and law-abiding group of Muslims. Many US lawmakers already know about our history, cause, and achievements. Now the Ahmadiyya Muslim Caucus has been formed, which I understand is the first Muslim caucus with bipartisan support of members of Congress. We are just getting off the ground. We have two terrific co-chairs in Representative Wolf and Representative Speier, two stalwart supporters of religious freedom for all people. But we have many sympathetic voices in US Congress. For example, over 30 members of Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, welcomed our global leader, His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad, at a reception on Capitol Hill in 2012. We are hopeful that we receive bipartisan support for this caucus on a very large scale from the House of Representatives. We are hopeful that this caucus will attract a lot of support because the focus is on redressing acute human rights violations of persecuted Ahmadi Muslims worldwide. In time, we hope that foreign governments that persecute our community or otherwise permit militants to attack Ahmadi Muslims with impunity will take notice of the caucus and its effort at pursuing justice and international religious freedom for all. The caucus will focus primarily on defending the human rights of persecuted Ahmadi Muslims worldwide. In particular, the caucus will focus on current Ahmadi Muslim prisoners of conscience in the Middle East and South Asia. But our focus is not just on the persecuted Ahmadi Muslims. We advocate for the rights of all persecuted religious communities in the world. So the caucus will focus broadly on protection for oppressed religious minorities. I'm very excited and humbled. This is a historic moment for our community. We have been here almost a century. We have engaged with our leaders and lawmakers in DC in a number of critical issues concerning religious freedom, pluralism, and civic engagement. So, in many ways, the effort is culmination of a century-old our efforts. Thank you again for coming. God bless the United States of America.